Everyone see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I should probably introduce myself a little bit before I do this. I'm Ruth. I've been involved with Extinction Rebellion since I went to the funeral thing in November 2018 and signed up then and became a regional coordinator for the Southeast. Well, I was at 4 of the counties in the Southeast, but then it sort of in February of 2019. And then I left regional coordination quite recently because it's important to rotate roles. I don't know if you talk about that in your group, but the importance of rotating roles, so people are sharing things and everybody has a experience of being in different spaces, so that the things that get stuck. So I'm now doing regenerative cultures, trying to build that in the region at the moment. And I got involved with climate emergency centres because my partner has a long history. He's quite known for setting up community centres, and he came across this really good way of finding a self-funding way. And I guess for me, when I look at climate emergency centres, they make sense to me. You're just talking about that hope. This is more about what is the solution, and the solution is found in local communities coming together and going, what do we need and how do we help each other meet those needs and get what we build, that community resilience and come together, really. And that's what these are about. So it's kind of looking at, it's more about solutions. And you know, you need that with all of this. You need to be having some solutions around. So yeah, so that's where I'm at the moment.
Ruth, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could I just remind everybody just to mute their sound, please? And also, if your cameras, if you can see, if the grids of people are on the right hand side of your screen, so you can't see Ruth's slides, there's a little black bar at the top with a little line, and if you click on that, it says hide thumbnail video. You can reduce the cameras so you can see the slides completely.
Okay. So this presentation was put together by one of the Guildford crew that have built. They've got a team coming together at the moment, and we thought it was quite a useful thing to have this generic presentation, which then any group that's getting together to build their own climate emergency centre can kind of use it and make it personalised for their local town or local community. To present to other groups who might be interested, or council or building owners, or whoever it might be that you want to talk to about it. It's just a useful thing. It kind of draws everything together. So this is what these are. The whole thing with climate emergency centres is each climate emergency centre is doing its thing. So it's not like there's no hierarchical kind of process and structure. Your community runs your community centre to meet the needs of your community. So it's different depending on who people are at. Okay. So I think we probably are going to know some of the history, but the scientific community and United Nations have demonstrated that on our current trajectory, by 2030, we'll pass the tipping points at which the climate crisis becomes irreversible, leading to runaway climate breakdown. And this is a nice handy, if you're going to be giving this presentation, it's a nice handy thing to talk about some of those tipping points, and some that might have already been passed, actually. I think the CI stuff like that we're all aware of. And then looking at where we are, I mean, governments, I guess, are struggling in our system, like struggling to know. I'm not somebody who believes that there's some sort of shadowy thing. I just think that our system doesn't have the resources to respond effectively as a government dealing with these things. And that's why I think it's useful for climate emergency centres and communities. We can do it. We don't have to get the government to do all of these things. We can do a lot of it ourselves. And when we look at what countries are doing at the moment in terms of the Paris climate agreement, most countries, including the EU, are not getting anywhere near to where we need to be compliant with the Paris Agreement. And most of us were heading to sort of 4 degrees centigrade sea level rise, and God knows what else going on, and temperature rise and scary things like that. We are not doing very well, and it's a struggle. So This is Surrey, because this was Guildford who did it, who put this together, and they pointed out. So if you're talking to Surrey County Council, they only have direct control of 30% of the emissions in county. And Guildford Borough Council, if they're talking to Guildford, only has 1%. And actually over 50% of the emissions are beyond the operations of that county and that borough's councils. And therefore they need to be tackled with extensive buy-in from local residents and businesses. So it needs to be a community-based change that happens. So this is about us saying, look, we know that we've got some power here too. It's not just about you guys, it's what we're doing too. Okay. How do you generate this community buy-in? Climate Emergency Centre is the next logical step after declaring climate emergency. So when you go to councils, a lot of them will have climate action plans. If they've declared a climate emergency, has Henley's declared a climate emergency?
Yes, in January, yeah.
Oh, perfect. Oh, yeah, you said. So yes, so they'll be developing or have developed a climate action plan. They've probably got officers and people who are involved in the council that are supposed to be actioning that plan. Councils at the moment, particularly with everything going on in the world with coronavirus and God knows what, they're really struggling with resources, struggling for funds, and they've got a plan that's supposed to be putting into action, and they've not got the resources they need to do it a lot of the time. So if you go along and say, hey, we've got this great thing that can help, and it brings in a lot of the residents, because it starts looking at it becomes a focal point for all the organisations and residents and businesses, so they can work together in building a climate action plan for your local community. So looking at these different areas. So the Climate Emergency Centre is designed to engage the wider community to drive meaningful action on not just the climate crisis, but on food poverty, fuel poverty, and homelessness in our borough. So it's climate justice focused. Ultimately, if a lot of the solutions to some of the problems in our societies and our communities, where we've got people going to food banks and things like that, are underpinned by the same systemic problems as the climate emergency. And if you start sharing food, you're fixing people's need for food, but you're also fixing the climate emergency, because we're not throwing out huge amounts of food. Sharing skills, you're fixing some of those problems where people are struggling, and because it's being shared amongst the community. We're looking after each other. So the Climate Emergency Centre then provides a space for doing talks and seminars, workshop spaces, circular economy, adaptation and resilience, engagement, community energy schemes, people's assemblies. One of the big parts, I don't know if you've heard of Future Democracy in XR, but they're kind of linked in with the Climate Emergency Centre stuff, because they're about having regular people's assemblies in the community where information is pushed back into the Climate Emergency Centre from the community members who attend the assemblies, but then also back through to the council as well, about this is where we're at, this is what we'd like, this is what we think is going well, this is what we'd like to change. And that information goes into the Climate Emergency Centre and out to the council. So the community is constantly enabled to be involved in what their centre looks like. And yeah, so there's things like co-op food schemes, time banks, vegan and veggie cafe, a gallery, recording space. Events are really important, having places where people come together and have fun and enjoy things together, having music venue, having those sorts of things coming in. Students using it for art spaces and things, and it brings in a much more different space as well. So those sorts of things come in, and then you start to get other groups who may not be aware of the climate. The XR, you're going, oh, this is a group who are students, or a group of older people, or whoever it might be, and you can start talking about what you're doing, and then hear what they're doing, and then you start to kind of cross-fertilize. Okay, so these are a couple of examples of climate emergency centres in the past. So the Hive in Dalston was a huge one. That was, it was a community space using the business model that climate emergency centres are using. And before the lease expired in 2019, it hosted 1,000 community events in 2.5 years, and was a huge, huge impact on the Dalston community where it was. And currently, my partner's just got a place in Ilford, at an old home base in Ilford, which he's turning into a climate emergency centre now. It's interesting with the coronavirus stuff, so there are some slight differences. So he's looking at vertical farming, and he's getting permaculture people in. He's speaking to Transition Town, The local transition town network, they're getting involved as well. The home base has got a gardening area, and so that they're going to start growing things there. They were talking to the local council about being a depot for food transport schemes and things like that during the coronavirus stuff. And they've also talked to a housing place recently. They're talking about planting trees and giving this CEC more land nearby for people to plant trees and things like that. So it's sort of become a space people go, oh, you're doing this, can you help with that? And there's actually a lot of businesses that want to do things, but they just don't know how. So you're giving a space and you're giving them a connection to a load of people in the community that then they go, oh, you're right, you can do this. And suddenly they've got this ability to be able to get involved and do things. So that's what's happening in Ilford. So the financial side of it, how it works. So yeah, in Ilford's case, Phoenix has got his own charity, so it's set up under his charity. But you set up as a legal entity of some kind. Which we've got loads of information on. We've got somebody called Polly from Brighton who does a load of stuff on that. She's really good, and will help. And once you set up, you're then eligible for 100% discretionary business rates. So all businesses have to pay business rates on all buildings, and councils have to pay business rates on their own buildings. Apparently, they have to pay themselves business rates. But if you gift or use that build space gets used by a charity or a not-for-profit entity, those business rates get slashed, and you can get up to 100% back from the council, depending on whether or not you're doing specific things for the community or their climate action plan or whatever. The owner of the vacant building offers the Climate Emergency Centre a meanwhile lease. It's a special legal term for a kind of lease that lasts maybe a year or two. And this allows the owner to save up to 100% of their business rate costs on the building. They then agree with you that you're going to get a percentage of the savings that they've made. So if they're saved, and I think I can't remember now the numbers on the Ilford one, it's like a £200,000 in business rates or something insane, because it's massive and it's in London. And so they're getting something like 12.5% of that. So they get something like £26,000 a year, which then goes back to fund the Climate Emergency Centre project and the upkeep and whatever else you might want to do with it. Okay. So for example, say a building owner pays £150,000 per annum. The Climate Emergency Centres, I'm just going to move this out of the way, obtains on business. I can't read the thing. Sorry, I've got you guys in my way. I don't know. Maybe I can do that. Obtains a rebate on business rates, which are passed on to the building owner. The owner pays outstanding 20% rates, 30,000, and contributes 20% of savings to the Climate Emergency Centre, and the Climate Emergency Centre would get £24,000 of funding, basically. Okay. The benefits for the building owner are that they get protected against theft. So you've got 24 hours caretaker security. They're giving back to their community. They save tens of thousands of pounds on maintenance and upkeep because you're looking after the place for them. There's no vandalism because it's not some empty building that's uncared for and looked at, so that, kids game and do all sorts of wonderful things. So yeah, benefits for the teams involved. There's generating income streams to fund projects and build resources through the space hire and the cafe and any merchandise or anything that you're selling. So like in Ilford's case, they've got the garden centre, so they could start selling some things in there as well. So you need to look at what you want to do with it and how you're going to use that space. And then you also get to share resources and skills and knowledge with other like-minded organisations and support each other's growth. You get improved access to the community through an established informal gathering space. So because you've got different groups coming in and using the space, you then get to talk to each other and find out what's going on for the local mums and babies group, or the local students union, or whatever it might be, or the local transition town. And you can start to think, okay, and they know stuff, and you start to see new ideas and new plans. And it helps to build community resilience. You're meeting the local community needs, and you're developing strong mitigation, adaptation, and support networks for the future crisis. If you start putting things in place where you've got allotments that are growing, if you start putting things in place where there's renewable energy being used, you start putting things in place where people are able to engage and access skills that they need, then as things start to break down, which we know things will, in this community has got more resilience. It's got these things in place and a way to connect already. Okay. The kinds of people who can use it. So in Guildford's case, things like the Eco Cinema, the Repair Cafe, Makerspace, Youth Strike for Climate, TerraCycle, Plastic Free Guildford, Extinction Rebellion, Guildford Environmental Forum, Surrey Greenpeace. So Guildford have got a bunch of these groups that have come together, and they're sort of forming the core team to build the Climate Emergency Centre. And then basically anyone else who's offering solutions to tackling the environmental degradation, our failing economic system, or making, in your case, Henley, a stronger community. And I think, is that the end of this? Yes, that is. I can stop. I think that's the end of it. I hope that didn't last too long. Did I whiz through it really too fast?
Oh, that was great. Thank you very much, Ruth. That was really helpful. So, hi, Julia. Welcome to the meeting. So, shall we spend 15 minutes or so on just a bit of a Q&A? And I guess that's kicked up a lot of questions for people. I mean, I'm sort of trying to visualize what the actual centre might look like. And I was interested, Ruth, when you were talking about the one in Dalston, which had obviously been really active and had loads of events and so on. Could you just describe, did you ever go to that one? Are you familiar with it? No, that
was my partner.
Okay.
I can go find him and get him to talk to him. He's somewhere here.
Well, I was just curious to know, I mean, maybe a different one that, have you been to any functioning one, or have you seen any photographs of one that's, no, okay.
No, so Ilford is the first one to set up. This is new, this is all new. So, yeah. So have you got the overview document?
Yes, the PDF, the 2-page PDF, yeah.
Yeah, so that's literally just been put together.
Okay.
Like a few months ago, and then we're still building the handbook. So we've got a few teams that are starting to get together now, and Staines has just been offered a building. Guildford have got a team going, so it's quite a lot in the southeast because I'm from the southeast. Yeah. The northeast are coming on strong though, which is quite nice. Right. So Manchester's got a team coming up. Yeah, so there's lots. We are right at the early stages of teams just being built together.
Okay.
One of the things I know when I was speaking to you, Kate, that you were saying that are we ready yet for a climate emergency centre? And I know Farnham, which is where I'm from, we're looking at whether they want to start with a climate cafe, and a sort of online one currently because of coronavirus, and use that as a way to start to connect with other groups in the local area and start to talk to them and build that team from that, so that they can then move forward in the future into a climate emergency centre. That's there.
I think that's a great idea.
Could I just sort of build on Dave's? I really like Dave's point around the running point being, does Henley 2030 look like, as a sustainable community, and get people's buy-in to let's visualize that? Because I think the good thing about coronavirus, but we've all been forced to reevaluate the way we live our lives and the way that we do live our lives, and therefore now's the time to say, and therefore let's recreate it in a way that's more sustainable. And like Dave's point of, and if we're going to reach our net zero goals by 2030, let's have a conversation as how we could do that as Henley, and then use that climate emergency area or space to facilitate those conversations, which is what it sounds like it's been done. But that's kind of the purpose, so we can all come together and say, and I like the structure you've got around food, around those different elements, and let's have that chat about how can we do it, and how do we start doing it now, in terms of the way we commute, the way we eat, the way we have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the real, for me, this is the real value of this project, that in the spirit of collaboration, we're all coming together and we're able to, share ideas and build trust with each other, as well as different groups, and have the Climate Emergency Centre, whether it's remote or face-to-face, will provide us with the opportunity of holding people's assemblies to have exactly those kind of discussions, Mark. What does Henley 2030 look like? You know, and then we get the engagement of the community as well, and we get people's buy-in, which then starts to raise awareness in the community as well, because then people go home, they talk to their family, talk to their friends and so on, and it starts to just generally turn, I think. Is that idea about collaboration and people's assemblies a key thing, Ruth, in what you XR is trying to do with these centres?
Yeah, and that's the thing with climate emergency centres. It's not an XR thing. So although Phoenix is involved in XR from early days, he's got a long history of being involved in environmental activism, and the Hive wasn't an XR project. It was before XR. So he's very much like everybody coming together, because he's seen like when communities come together and they start feeding off each other, and they kind of, you know, suddenly you don't know what's going to happen until you get a group of old people and a group of young people talking to each other, and then there's suddenly all these ideas and these things start to kind of feed and create new things, and they come up with new solutions. So it's very much about bringing a lot of movements together and a lot of groups together. And currently we've got mutual aid networks that are set up all over the place. So networks of people who suddenly come together as a community to look after their community. You know, they're ideal groups of people to be getting involved in this, because they want to do stuff. People want to do stuff in their community.
That's true.
Just one other thing, sorry, one last thing I just wanted to add on that was, and whether it can be sort of referenced more around, going back to Dave's point again in terms of the vision, around lifestyle design. You know, this is kind of climate emergency, you know, it's important because it is an emergency and we've got to address it. But what we're trying to do, we're trying to design a sustainable lifestyle that is, dare I say, aspirational, or something you want to buy into, that will get more people engaged. Maybe I don't know. I think it's trying to make this something that we all want to do. I think we've all had this experience of spending more time with our family, which may be good or bad, but I think we've all had good experiences from coronavirus as well as bad experiences. So how can we make this, you know, aspirational and positive, and this, you know, get people involved? We want to do this. Why wouldn't you? You know.
Yeah. I love the aspirational lifestyle. What lifestyle do we want to design? I love those wordings. That's very appealing.
Yeah, good.
But so Ruth, or everybody, but so this looks a bit like almost a sort of startup, like it's really like setting up, it's a startup, let's say. So you need to find a place, run it, manage finances, recruitment. So it's really like opening a sort of little, I don't know how to say, restaurant come theater come meeting place come. Yes, I think the idea is great. I can very well see something like this in Henley, definitely. I think there's definitely an appetite for sure to have, but it's a lot of work to set this up, but hey, why not? Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's really exciting. I think the idea of it is fantastic. My only reservation is in the current climate, how it would work. I'm trying to get my head around, because we're all trying to social distance within 2 meters. Had we not been in this situation, I could, you know, but I think the idea is brilliant. If we can get our heads around how this is going to work, because we might have to social distance for quite some time yet, to how this will work in the short term.
I think, Liz, there are 2 levels to it. There's a physical level, which is the actual space, which is the final sort of solution where we would hope to end up. But, you know, as all businesses are taking things remotely, there's also, you know, the non-physical level of it, which is about relationships, collaboration, sharing of information, building trust, expanding awareness, all of those things. And we can do those things remotely.
And the support within communities that are already happening to cash in on that, to build on that, because it's all there already.
Ruth.
Right, you can start as a website, really, in a way, no? Couldn't it? I mean, I suppose because you do need a place, even an online space, but you need a space. I think that is where everybody can converge, a sort of forum, let's say, where everybody can meet. So that can be done online for sure. But we don't have a choice anyway for now. So, but
we are lucky that they are starting to relax some of the conditions. So we are allowed out. And so one of the things that Phoenix is going to be doing in the Ilford space is setting up a sort of checkerboard thing around the whole thing. So it's like 2 meter squares everywhere. So people know how to see. People can come in and be, because we are going to want to be in spaces with each other. We're just going to have to be socially distanced in those spaces. So he's going to set up a checkerboard all along. And then we saw something in, is it Denmark or Norway, where somebody held a concert outside and everybody came in their cars to this pop stars concert. And so and this place has got this massive car park, so he's thinking, I can do that. So there's all these things that ways that you can have events which are socially distanced, which keep people but are also still enable people to gather. It is a big thing. It does take time to build. So the initial phase is getting that team together, and then splitting into sort of 4 working groups: one to go to the council, one to set up the legal entity, one to look at the buildings and building owners, and one to do the outreach to other groups and the local community. And having those sort of 4 working groups working on those 4 broad areas. And the first thing when you get that team together is to do a vision. Because once you start talking about, do some visioning, what do we want this to look like? And you started talking about that a little bit with the aspirational lifestyle, which I think is, so much when we talk about the climate crisis, like, oh my God, we're going to lose so much. But we're going to gain so much from this. We're moving into a space that a lot of us want to be in. We want to be more connected. We want to be spending more time with each other. We want to be more part of our community. We want to be more connected with nature. We want to be, and so all of those things are aspirational. So looking at that visioning side of it and getting on board with an agreed vision of what this is going to be about and what are the main things that you want your space to look like, and then go from there. So yeah.
Jamie.
Hi Ruth, thank you for your presentation. How long do you think in the case of Ilford that it's going to take to set up those working groups, get to the stage where you're moving forward collectively to implement that vision?
I don't know, I'm not involved in much in Ilford. They've already got the building.
I mean, take any example, that you know of.
I would say with Ilford, I mean, in Phoenix's case, he already had a charity set up, and he already had a building, and he already had a team of people. So he was already sort of part of the way there, because he's been working and doing this sort of stuff for a while. But he's now building up the community links and the community networks, and that's going to take a few months, I would say, to get people involved. But he's got there's somebody doing some research project on vertical farming or something, and he wants to do everything southeast. He wants to do any climate emergency centres that get set up in the southeast, because he wants to do this research on this vertical farming he'd like to be involved with. So it's Mark somebody, and I've forgotten his name. Anyway, he's at some university. So yeah, so that's another thing. So so he's already got like a bunch of those sorts of groups that are getting involved in the centre, but that's going to take a few months. And yes, the coronavirus thing has changed things slightly, so you can't kind of go, oh, come on over, because
Maggie.
Thank you, Ruth. It sounds really inspiring. It's encouraging, because we're feeling a bit jaded with obviously CV. But I was wanting to ask Jackie about the Henley Town Council attitude and the feeling of progress, really. Can you give us any encouragement, or is it a little bit 3 steps forward, 2 back? How are you being received, and on levels of electrifying battery, for cars, and I think there's about a dozen things that you're all trying to work with at the same time, and just wondered Is everyone feeling a bit lethargic, like some of us? How's that going? Oh, you're on mute.
Jackie, you're muted, yeah.
Yeah. If I start talking, I might lose connection, but I'll try and stay with you. I think it's a mixture of things. Obviously, the situation is different, so we've had to make adjustments and do meetings online and so on. But to give a bit of background, the people from the Neighbourhood Plan Committee went along to Oxford last year, and they went along to a talk about getting councils to lead the way in climate emergency. And as a result of lots of activity from Greener Henley, which was Henley in transition at the time, there were some presentations done at the town council, and this led to asking the council to consider declaring a state of climate emergency, which they did. So as a result of declaring that, the climate emergency working group was set up, and they have set some projects in motion, one of which is the first one's already been rolled out, which is solar streets. There is electric vehicle charging, there is retrofit for homes, there is standards for new homes, and so on. So there's a whole program being rolled out, and there is, I just got the details here, there is, and it's virtually set up. In fact, it will be discussed at the planning meeting tonight at the Town Council, Chiltern Hills Community Energy Group, and that is looking, it's a similar thing actually to what you're talking about here, but it's more to do with public buildings, businesses, and so on. So actually there's a lot of work going on, and the council are very supportive, and we are set up within it as such.
Great.
Jackie, could I ask you, do you have any questions to Ruth about these centres?
Not currently. What I was busy thinking about is how things fit together. You've got Greener Henley, you've got the Climate Emergency Working Group, you've got other committees within the council too. You've got, Greener Henley has lots of, it's like an umbrella for lots of different groups, like wildlife groups, planting trees. There's a quite a wide range of activity already going on. So I think I'm thinking more about identifying what's going on and where, to make sure that you link up properly and you don't duplicate things, and then to see how this community energy centre would sit alongside what's already happening. And like Mark Chapman, you've already been, your work is on reducing carbon, isn't it? That's what you've been doing, you said, for 12 years. So it's identifying all of those different things and how they sit together and work together, or could work together better. Yeah,
Brilliant.
I think, Jackie, just one thing that's missing. Well, would you agree with this, that there isn't an overarching vision, back to that word, and there isn't an overall plan? It's really been picking up on things that we can do, Henley Town Council can do. So the solar streets was something, they identified the electric charging point was something I could get on with. But I mean, there are big gaps.
Well, the vision for, in terms of the climate emergency working group, comes from the climate emergency itself, which was from the last IP report number 5, which said that we had 2 years ago, we had 12 years left to reduce carbon to a certain amount. So the climate emergency working group is working to that vision of reducing carbon within this period of time. That is the vision. So it's quite a practical one on climate emergency working group, because they are aiming to do something by a certain time, you know, by certain activity. If that makes
Thank
sense.
you, thank you, Jackie. So I'm just mindful of, I appreciate there's a lot we need to discuss broadly about, you know, the work that the Climate Emergency Working Group is doing and how we all link together as local groups and so on. I am keen to try and make sure that we, you know, really take advantage of Ruth being here to be able to sort of try and put questions to her on the climate emergency centres. Does anybody else have, Ed, are you putting your hand up? Yeah. Yeah.
Ruth, how big a team do you think would be needed in terms of like 20 really committed people to make it work?
Once you've got the team set up, once you've got the centre set up.
Well, to get it going, yes.
You need 8 to get it going. You need a sort of 8 to 12 people, I would say, to get a sort of a committed group of people, and they need to be coming from different groups. It's important that they are drawn from different parts. It's not just all one, like all XR or all whoever, so that you get those different networks being brought in as well, and there's different skills and there's different viewpoints.
Ruth, are those people people who are sort of you know, retired and this is the only thing they're doing, or are these people with full-time jobs and they're doing it on the side? How has it tended to work?
It depends on where people are at. Some of them are doing it, like Guildford is being run by, actually he's self-employed, but yeah, he's doing it around his work, and then he's getting people who are coming from other people who are other professionals, so they're working and doing this. So yeah, it doesn't need to be full-time, you know, but some people will be. Some people are full-time, you know, involved in XR, or some are full-time involved in some kind of other movement, and then they can dedicate their time. But it's fine to have it just doing in your spare time and doing what you can with it.
And could we you mentioned somebody about vertical farming, but do you think there's anybody sort of employed by XR who could give us assistance, give us their time and their assistance?
To do?
Well, just to help with setting the project up. I think you mentioned somebody in Brighton on legal. I mean,
Polly, yeah.
to what extent would we be able to draw in help and resource from the XR structure?
So we've got, there's a chat, there's a Climate Emergency Centre chat that I can add a couple of you to. And on there is like everybody who's setting up Climate Emergency Centres currently. And so Polly's on there, who does the legal stuff. Phoenix is on there. We've got Jules on there as well, there's a really good, he does a lot of the tech stuff in XR, the IT stuff, and there's a really good piece of software called Vocal Eyes that is coming out, that he's been involved, or somebody who's been involved with this, setting this up, and it's a really useful online community organising tool. So it helps with community democracy. So people are involved in the Climate Emergency Centre can have discussions and then vote on what they agree with and not agree with, and you can get that immediate feedback, and you just help to organise everybody. So he's on there as well. We've got somebody called Henry on there who's involved with the XR politics side. And he's helpful in terms of going to councils and how to talk to councils and things like that, and where to look for. So you've got a few people in that group that you can talk to about those things.
Okay, so it sounds as if we'd be able to ask questions and advice, but we wouldn't have somebody who would be part of our team. We would need to source those people ourselves. Okay. Ed, did you have another question on that?
Yes. Once the centre's up and running, do you imagine like there's like 2 people who are from the centre, at the centre, all through the opening times? And then people come in to run their thing and then go off again. But there's, from the point of view of the people from the centre, you need a staffing of something like 2 all the time.
That would depend on you. It's your centre, so you would look at, you know, whatever you get, and the one that Staines has been offered the building. There's the Staines Council, actually, not Staines, where they Spelthorne Council offered them a building, it's one that can only be open until 6 p.m. It's useful because it's right in the centre of the town, because it's an old retail property building, but it can only be opened until 6. So what sorts of things they do in that centre is different to one that's open 24 hours or whatever. Ilford has 24-hour caretakers that there's like 2 or 3 people and they do shifts. One of the things you can do if you've got a cafe and things like this, that can then help to fund people to be there to working full time. The idea, once you're set up and the centre is running, the idea is that you have sort of a core group of people who are the sort of core working group organisers, and then beyond that you've got the support network, and beyond that you've got like the local community interested people, and all of those people can kind of feed in to those things. So you would need like a group of people. One of the things that's in the handbook is once you get to that point, once it's set up, different ways that you can organize and run things in a sort of more circular community-based way, because you don't want to kind of do the same thing as organizations or companies normally do, where you've got like a managing director and then a whole bunch of people underneath, because that's not where communities are at. This is for them, so they're going to want something that's more bottom up, where they're feeding into and having direct input to what their community centre looks like. So there's lots of different ways that you can do that in suggestions and in the handbook.
Liz?
Just trying to get my head around, do you have anyone within these centres, are you imagining that there'll be any aspect of these centres which are run by, say, a private business? Like, say, for example, if there's a cafe in Henley who's experienced in vegan food, for example, that they could open a branch within the centre and maybe and sort of profit share, so they would be open all the time and feed some of that money back, so that there's a private enterprise element to it as well as community? Or is it just seen as like 100% community? Does that make sense?
That's up to you. But I don't know how that would work in terms of if you're a not-for-profit climate emergency centre and getting the business rates rebate. If you're getting not-for-profit things within it, I don't know how that would work. That would be
that's what I'm wondering.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know how that would work, but entirely up to you if that's the way you want to do it. I know the Hive had a cafe that ran, but the funds that it raised went back into paying the costs of the staff that were running the cafe, their wages. But then also,
okay, I understand. So the people working there on a sort of full-time basis could be paid a wage then, but it's okay. I think you've answered my question in saying what you're saying there.
Oh, okay.
That you could run a payroll and have full-time staff working in a cafe or whatever, but then the profits are fed back in. Yeah. So you could have somebody with experience in running a cafe, a vegan cafe, for example, coming in and setting up a vegan store, pay them to do that, but they don't actually own it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm just have a question about the XR brand and how wise it is to. We've been hearing from Simon last week. There's a gentle feeling coming that we need to lay that down and let the other all the other groups, Cafe Scientific, all Greener Henley. There's so many groups feeding in the tree planting people that would have found XR2 activist and therefore distancing themselves, and have Ilford and these other places found it best to quieten that, or has it been valued for keeping it in a special little pocket of activist stuff once actions in London, say, are required, that there is a place for that, and you haven't got to pretend. I just wondered about the balance, really.
I think, and I think this is where the decentralisation is so important with XR, depending on your local community. So Henley is a specific kind of local community where XR might not be something that they, certain parts of XR, they kind of go, oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And that's, so you do it in the way that works for you. I think, what's my feelings on it? Ilford's not had an issue with the XR stuff. That's not been in a transition town, and this this guy that's doing all the research or whatever, and there's another group in the university actually want to research, like, yeah, and there's some other research that's going to be done around what groups you get in, what events are happening, how many people are getting engaged, and that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's another thing. So none of them have had a problem with Extinction Rebellion, but you're Henley. And I'm in Farnham, similar. So yeah, so you need to kind of have a look at what that local community feels like, and kind of set your XR up to meet your community needs and what feels comfortable and right for your local community. So yeah, I think it's really important that the XR, yes, we might go into London and block roads at times, but you know what happens in the local community is the XR group doing stuff for their local community and what you guys need to do. So.
Thank you, Ruth. Natalie?
If I may too, I'm not sure I agree 100% with you, Maggie, because I think on the contrary, first of all, it can be a very good way of entering into contact in people in Henley, because the few times I've been at Christmas when we were doing an action anyway, I talked. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, there is an XR Henley," and they laughed and they said it was really incongruous, really, and so it was a very point to start talking. And actually, I wouldn't want to tone down XR, because on the contrary, it really, for me, embodies all the things I believe in, and show that it's not only people, preventing Londoners to go to work or beating drums or stuff, but that is just everybody, anybody. So I think on the contrary, we can maybe make the XR brand a bit more posh in Henley, but still have it. That's my view.
Thanks, Natalie. Ruth, yeah. Ruth? Ruth, can you hear me? Yeah? Oh, we can't hear you, Ruth.
One of the things that's been happening in the southeast, just to let you know, one of the things that's in the southeast groups, or local XR groups, are often working with other groups in their local areas, particularly around pension divestment stuff. That's quite big in the southeast. It seems to be quite a strong push. A lot of the XR groups are wanting to do that, but they're working very closely with other groups in their local areas. With their local council to get pension divestment happening and things like that. So that's happening a lot with other local groups, and XR's been quite okay. So on a local level, doing those sorts of campaigns with other groups seems to be quite a functional thing. XR's quite happily accepted.
Thank you, Ruth. I think the sound's going a little bit. Dave, you wanted to say something?
Well, I was just going to say just that the most important thing is keeping the airways open, keeping coordination going and talking to each other within the different groups, so that we don't go duplicating things, and we want to be, when there's a particular issue or thing that we want to achieve, then we need to be working together, and it doesn't really matter whether it's Green Henley or XR or
Yeah, absolutely. I'm conscious we're coming to the end of the meeting. I think Jackie's got to leave shortly, so thank you very much for joining us, Jackie. Does anybody else have any questions? Perhaps some of the people who've done. Yes, Diana. You're muted, Diana. If you could unmute yourself.
Done it.
Hey.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not playing devil's advocate here, but the thing I don't understand is why would an owner of a building in Henley pay you to use it? According to your graph, it would be about 50% they end up paying for the fact that you're actually using their building.
So what happens is they have to pay business rates. So if their building is empty, it's a non-residential building, they have to pay business rates even if they're not using it, which can be hundreds of thousands of pounds. But if they allow a charity or a not-for-profit organisation to use their building, they can get the business rates back. So they save a huge amount of money, and then all you do is you negotiate with them to have sort of 10 to 15% of money that they're saved come to the climate emergency centre, to be fed into the climate emergency centre. So they're actually saving potentially £100,000, and they're giving you £15,000. And so they're feeding back into the community, and a lot of businesses want to find ways that they can do things to help with the climate emergency, because a lot of people are aware of this now. So I did do good stuff in London. It did make a point. And so businesses are going, how do we do this? And here's the way that they do it. A, by saving a lot of money, but B, they're also helping to fund things that are important and about the local community, and it gives them a good name in their local community as well.
Thank you, Ruth. Now, does anybody else have perhaps the final question? Ed. Oh, sorry, Mark.
Carry on, Ed.
Go on, Ed. Go on, Ed.
Okay. What's the typical life of one of these centres? Do you guess?
The meanwhile lease that Ilford has got is 2 years. Whether that will be, so I think Ilford, the Hive ran for about 5 years, I think, or something. I can't remember now. It's somewhere in the presentation. Sorry, I can't remember. It ran for a few years because it got renewed. The meanwhile lease got renewed, but the meanwhile lease is only ever like a couple of years. Because it's meant to be, it's a lease that's there in the meantime while they're looking at what they're going to do with their building, so that they can lease it and still have control over what they want to do with their business, basically. But then what often happens is they haven't got any ideas what they're going to do with the business, and this looks quite well and it's functioning quite well and it's giving them good things. So hopefully it would be renew.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruth. Thank you for joining us. That's been enormously helpful. You've given us a lot of food for thought. It's obviously a really big project to take on, but I'm also mindful that it's not an XR project. It's a project for the community. And I think we need to discuss it. I think as a collection of groups. Ruth, would you be happy for us to circulate the recording of this, this part of the meeting to the Climate Emergency Working Group in Greener Henley? Okay, perfect.